My name is Vanessa Velasquez, and I will be presenting on Hail Caesar. My first thesis is Capitalism in the Golden Age of Hollywood, from Barton Fink to Hail Caesar, Capitalism in Hollywood's Golden Age. Examining the capitalism in Hollywood is not so easy a feat, as it is something that the big players of the industry wish to not discuss. The Coen brothers, however, have gained quite the reputation for not caring much for beating around the bush when it comes to taboo subjects. This shows in more than one of their films, and is prominent from their characters to the time periods that they choose to work with, especially in this film. Hail Caesar exhibits ties to capitalism and gives a show of the tale-as-old-as-time feud between capitalism and communism. My learning objectives for this thesis are: examine how capitalism is at play in the film, analyze the parallels between real Hollywood and the Hollywood depicted in the film, and examine the effects of capitalism on the story's meaning. My evidence is as follows. In the film itself, we see many exhibits of capitalism at play, and the first example we are provided with is one of our movie's main characters and the first person that we meet, Eddie Mannix. Eddie's character is a direct tie to the real world, as he is named after a real Hollywood figurehead. Eddie's character is known for bullying stars into obedience to maintain a good reputation for the studio that they work for. His devout loyalty to his workplace, despite the damage that it may inflict on others, shows a profound real issue that occurs in Hollywood to this day. In an article posted by the Oxford Culture Review, Mannix is described as a practicing Catholic whose primary driving force seems to not be religion, but capitalism. This shows a very real issue with capitalism, as it often puts the needs of the studios and the corporations before the well-being of their lower-level employees. This happened with many people. One example is Judy Garland. She was driven to a drug addiction because she was supposed to be skinnier and prettier than she was, and they were force-feeding her drugs to get her to do that. So that's a real example of capitalists wanting to monetize somebody's looks over their health and well-being. When the character of Baird Whitlock finally returns after being kidnapped by communists, he starts talking about how evil capitalism is and how it plays off the backs of hard-working people only to give them the short end of the stick. Whitlock's outburst is met with a literal slap to the face from Mannix, who bore these harsh words: "The picture has worth, and you have worth if you serve the picture, and you're never going to forget that again." This line is paired with the fact that Whitlock was also criticized for wasting valuable production time by being kidnapped, solidifies the film's underlying view of how capitalists do not care about the people that work for them. In an article analyzing these themes in the Coen brothers films, published by The Atlantic, David Sims writes, "It's very clearly a film about creative frustration, but you could argue Hollywood is also a metaphor for something larger, or that Barton Fink is a satire of the studio system itself. It is from these films that we must ask ourselves the questions that have no clear answers. Hollywood can be a metaphor for many things, and based on this evidence, I would say that in this film particularly, Hollywood is a metaphor for the ethics of big figureheads and conglomerates." This is a clip at the end of the movie. This clip showcases one of the many times that the studio head Eddie Mannix bullies characters and actors into mindless fear-based submission. After Whitlock's brooding kidnapper's day out experience, he is basically met with a "that's tough, now get back to work and pretend like you like it" ultimatum.
History, sociology, politics, morality, everything. It's all in a book called Capital. Alright, now, these guys even figured out what's going on in the studio, because the studio is nothing more than an instrument of capitalism. Yeah, so we blindly follow these laws or any other institution. The studio makes pictures to serve the system. That is its function. That's really what we're up to. Yeah, it's just confirming what they call status quo. I mean, we may tell ourselves that we're creating some artistic bound, some sort of spiritual dimension to the picture business, but what it really is this fat cat, Nick Skank, out in New York, running this factory that's serving up these lollipops. What they used to call a bread circuses for the skank in the studio to everyone else who works here. If I ever hear you badmouthing Mr. Skank again, the last thing you say before I have you tossed in jail for colluding in your own production.
Eddie, I would never do that.
Shut up. You're gonna go out there and you're gonna finish Hell Season. You're gonna give that speech to the needed penitent thief and you're gonna believe every word you say.
Yeah, but
You're gonna do it because you're an actor, and that's what you do. Just like the director does what he does, and the writer and the script girl and the guy who claps the slate. You're gonna do it because the picture has worth, and you have worth if you serve the picture, and you're never gonna forget that again.
sorry. Don't forget it.
Damn right. Not as long as I run this film. There. Go out there and be a star.
This clip is a good showcase of how you could have literally the worst day of your life, but it doesn't matter if you're wasting the studio's time and money because all that they care about ultimately is the production. My discussion questions for this are: why does the Coen brothers' approach to film bother Big Hollywood? And where can we see real-life examples of situations depicted in Hail Caesar in Hollywood? My second thesis is the impact of working with two production companies. One of the companies involved belongs to the Coen brothers, the directors of our film. The other company is a British company owned by Universal Studios called Working Pictures. The outcome of Hail Caesar was left in the hands of two companies that had to agree with everything for the movie to be any kind of success. From the plot and the writing to the casting and set design, everything had to be agreed upon between two different teams working together. There has been a history of production companies clashing with each other and causing issues with their projects, but this does not seem to be the case with the Coen brothers and Working Pictures. My learning objectives for this thesis are: establish if there are any disagreements between the two production companies, discuss any issues caused by creative differences, and discuss how the movie production responsibilities and direction were divided amongst the two companies. From what I could find, there didn't seem to be any kind of big disagreements between the companies. In fact, this film, from the evidence that was gathered, seems to be very much a Coen brothers film, with Universal acting more as a silent partner. The set production's designer, Jess Gonker, mentioned in an interview with Collider that whenever he works on a Coen brothers film, the outcome is never really what he thought it was going to be. He also stated that nothing was ever really changed once production had started. This statement was affirmed by the Coen brothers in an interview that they did with Ann Mavity. When asked if there was ever a time that they added scenes to the movie as an afterthought, they responded with, "That doesn't happen. The process is so involved that you gotta kinda know what you're doing in the terms of production before you start. Some people make movies that way, but we don't." No evidence of Universal having any overhead input of them forcing something into the movie that they thought that they wanted that the Coen brothers did not, or vice versa, could be found. My application of ideas is that the production process had to have gone well between the Coens and the Universal, as there's no evidence of any disagreement between the two. In fact, an announcement was made by Universal that the Coen brothers were working on a script with them for the reboot of the movie Scarface. This announcement was made in 2017. They announced that they were working on the script, but they hadn't fully announced that they were doing the movie until 2020. Though for a little while the Coen brothers only worked on smaller projects like streaming services like Netflix, it appears that there's no animosity or issues with disagreements between Universal and the Coens, as they continue to work together on future projects. My discussion questions for this thesis are: were there any unspoken, unwritten production disagreements between the two companies, and if their Working Pictures had wanted to change something about the film that was particularly a mark of the Coen brothers, what would they have changed?